So AI is so helpful for sales research. Everything else I pretty much hate.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Humans in the Loop. Today, I am joined by Aleasha Bahr, who is the founder of Black Sheep Sales. She was Perceptive X's top sales expert of the year in 2025. And I'm not surprised because I've just read her book, Black Sheep Sales, How to Win More Sales Without Acting Like a Douchebag. And we're going to be talking about douchebags today. And it is absolutely brilliant. I love the book. I highly recommend it. And I will link to it in the description. Aleasha has sold tens of millions in professional services. She's trained over 100 founders and teams with underwhelming sales results, and she's turned them into top tier sales conversion machines, converting 80% of their sales calls. So Aleasha, welcome. It is so brilliant to have you here on the Humans in the Loop.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather. I'm so excited to be here.
So before we talk about douchebags, which I really do want to talk about, perhaps you could start by giving me a little bit of background. So what was the journey that brought you to develop the Black Sheep sales process? How did you realize you were a black sheep?
Yeah, well, so I've always been a black sheep in pretty much every area of my life that you possibly could be. And when I say black sheep, it's not just in the family, although I am in the family too. It's really like you see an opportunity to do something different than the status quo of whatever, being a parent, being a wife, being a mother, being a business owner, being a sales professional. And people are resistant to you offering an alternative or better way. And it takes courage to be able to say, yeah, I know this is uncomfortable to think about doing something different, but I'm just not going to be okay with mediocre results. And this is how we can get fantastic results. That's usually the drive behind a black sheep. So when I started, I didn't have any illusions about how hard being a business owner is because my family is a family of entrepreneurs. And I saw what it looked like. And so I started in marketing that ended up being sales because it was basically account management, and people just loved to work with me because I wanted to make sure they got results. And I guess that's different from the experience that a lot of them have, which is weird to me. And then I went to media sales from there, and I never really did things in this pushy, aggressive way. I was more what you would call an idea seller. I would be like, "Ooh, I see you have this event coming up. I have such a great idea about how we could wrap it in this story and then have these signups and whatever," and just different ways of approaching sales. But media didn't deliver on promises. And at a point I was just really embarrassed. And I was like, I'm going to do my own thing. And I started my own marketing agency, and it was very successful. But then I realized that I really missed sales, and it's hard to hire staff for a marketing agency and that in between grow spot where you're like, I don't make more money, but I'm doing more work. I was like, I don't want to do that. So I noticed there was a huge gap in sales training, and it caused a lot of people to straight up quit whatever they were building, because when they try, people get into business and they're like, I love what I'm doing, and then they think, oh no, I have to sell, I didn't think about that part. And then they look into sales training and it's all the most uncomfortable, out of alignment stuff, and they're like, I don't know if I can do this. And all of the sales experts are like, you have to. This is the way it's done. It doesn't matter if it feels weird. You have to do, 100 rejections and get excited to hear every no. And this is fantastic propaganda from sales people, right? And so I work with people, and I didn't know exactly how I was going to help them at first as a consultant, but they'd tell me about the offer that they had, and I'd be like, oh, okay, are you asking these? Are you, so you basically do this? And they'd be like, oh, I really like how you said that. And I'd be like, okay, well, why don't I just write it down for you? Because a lot of times people are talking about their deliverables instead of their results. And then I'd be like, are you asking these questions? And they'd say, no, I'm not. Okay, well, for your offer specifically and the audience you're talking to, we need to ask these questions. And then over time, I started noticing patterns in these frameworks that I was putting together. And they were very different from what the traditional status quo sales process is, which the traditional one is set an agenda, maintain the authority, silence after the investment, different things like a permission selling, ask them if you can share some details about the offer now. And so that's how the black sheep sales method was.
Oh, that's so interesting. And that really resonates. I did an MBA, and sales just wasn't part of the curriculum.
It's so
Like, it
crazy.
just wasn't taught. And it's the most fundamental thing to building a successful business is being able to sell. It just didn't feature. It just wasn't even
How?
mentioned.
I don't think there's a single class. Like, I don't think you can
No,
look up at a university sales 101. Like, it doesn't exist.
no. And it absolutely should, because it's such an important and a special skill. So, how do douchebags sell then? You mentioned things like permission selling and stuff. What are douchebags doing that we don't do?
Yeah. So, douchebags, the only goal in the sales conversation is to get a yes. And that ironically creates less yeses because it's got a different energy to it. Everything you're saying has a convincing energy to it. And the other person can feel that. And everybody likes to buy, but nobody wants to be sold, right?
Mm.
So douchebags are really focused on like manipulating the conversation to back someone into a corner where they have to say yes. And it's like the only criteria for someone to be a yes is that they have a working credit card. And sometimes that's not even a criteria. It's like, well, can you get a loan? Like,
Yeah.
can you go ask grandma? Like, it gets really douchebaggy. There are levels to it, right? But yeah, they're really using these tricks rather than actually understanding what the other person needs and naturally identifying whether it's a fit or not. Because if it's a fit, then there's no need to manipulate anyone. It's a fit. You have what they need. Their expectations line up with what you deliver. And it's a very easy sale at that point rather than doing all these like mental gymnastics to convince the other person that they're lost, that they're dumb, that they will be a failure without your offer. These are the types of strategies in so many words. And it's very much like this almost adversarial battle type of
Mm.
feel where they say like the sale doesn't start till you get to objections, and they're just trying to like overcome all the objections when it's like, why don't you just understand if it's a valid concern?
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I love where you say, I think in the book and on your website, you say, if it's a fit, it's a fact. By which I'm presuming that you mean that you don't need to do any convincing once you've found out that it's a fit.
Yeah, everything in the conversation goes back to that, right? So somebody has an objection. All right, maybe it's not a fit. Let's explore that. 9 out of 10 times, the person's confused about something you said or has a
Yeah.
lack of clarity or whatever. But if you come from that approach where it's essentially a detachment from the sale and your only interest is the other person, because you don't want nightmare clients, like you've had nightmare clients, right? Like they're not worth the energy. They keep you from making more money.
Yeah.
And so you want to explore it as much for the other person as for you. Like, okay, let's talk about this concern. And you even want to prompt those early. Like, well, how much time do you have? Because I just want to set the stage here that you're going to need this much time. And if you don't have this much time, then you're not going to get a result that you like. And we can just part ways as
Yeah.
friends. And, like it's a very different energy to bring to the conversation that makes the other person feel safe because they're safe to say no. They're
Mm.
more likely to say yes.
That's very interesting. And I think the weeding out nightmare clients at the start is so important. When I was building my marketing agency, I remember we were approached by a potential client and they wanted us to pitch. They're a tech company and they had a really good budget, great brief. And I had the chemistry call with them. And there were always red flags that I looked out for. And one of the questions I always asked was, how many agencies have you invited to pitch? And they'd
Ooh.
invited 15 agencies. And I was just like, you don't know what you want. You can't possibly know what you want because there is no chance that 15 agencies you could narrow down your requirements to where it's pretty obvious that there's 4 agencies that might be able to meet them. But getting 15 agencies to pitch, you don't know what you want. You don't value your own time, so you're not going to value mine. So we just walked away. And I did keep checking, and I never saw them appoint anyone. I never, there was never an announcement that they closed the deals. Yeah, that was just a massive time waste for the other 14 agencies that presumably went ahead and pitched.
Yeah, I love that you were like able to identify that meant that they wouldn't respect your time. That is very important. I would want to ask them, what are you looking for? How
Mm.
are you going to know that this is the agency? Is it just
Mhm.
based on cost?
Yeah.
Because if it's based on cost, just don't even mess with it. I mean, I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with where they can say, we are not the cheapest option. We
Mm.
focus on quality. What are
Yeah.
you looking for? And that can really be a selling point for a lot of people. But 15 agencies makes me think that they were just looking for the cheapest or to pit people against each other to get price down or something really
Or
obnoxious.
ideas. They wanted ideas pitched to them so that they could build up their vat of ideas for their campaigns or something like that. So what would be other red flags that you would look for that would tell you that a client's going to be a nightmare client, or they're not going to be a fit and they're not worth pursuing or continuing with giving them your time?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's different for each industry and offer. But one thing that's really helpful is to think about the patterns in the clients who were not happy with results. What did they have in common? Did they have an expectation that was usually it's that they had an expectation that was unrealistic? They thought you were going to do everything and they didn't have to do anything.
Mhm.
They thought they didn't need to have staff working with you. You need at least one point person, maybe.
Mm.
Maybe they don't have something in place. Like in sales, if you don't have the capacity to fulfill more, that's a problem. You need to have that in place before you increase your sales. Or lead generation. Do you have predictable lead generation before you do sales? You're talking about PR and how they wanted that as lead generation. You need to have lead generation before you do PR
Mm.
because you need income, right? So you can ask ahead of time about that. And instead of letting it wait till the end, and be very honest with people, because when they say, yeah, we have lead gen, great. Those are the people I do my best work with. You can
Yeah.
tell someone that means you're a fit,
Mm.
and they can feel the relief from knowing who's not a fit. Because everybody in a sales conversation is thinking like, what aren't they telling me?
Yeah.
What is the exception here? What's the fine print? How am I going to get for lack of a better term?
Yep.
So just let them know, look, this is when I don't get results. Is that you? And they can
Mm.
say, no, that's not me. Great, let's do this. And you can feel more confident, because a lot of times people have this unintentionally, this sort of uncertain energy because
Mm.
they're scared of overpromising and they don't know for sure. And it's like, well, just make sure. And then once you say, are you this? Do you have this, that, and the other? That's what I need to get results. These are the situations I don't have success. They confirm that's what they're signing up for. Then that confidence is going to change in your tone, and the other person's going to feel it, and you're going to get excited.
That's so true. And also, don't be desperate. And because it can smell desperation, can't they? If you're desperate to close the sale, it really does make it that much harder because the client can pick up on it, can't they? Just so interesting.
Yeah, well, that's when the only goal is to get a yes, and
Mm.
it's based on my goals, not the other person's. Somebody can feel that. Like, I don't care what your goals are. I care about what my goals are as a prospect, right? I don't care if you need to make bills or if you need, like, none of that matters. And so really being able to take the focus off of whatever your agenda is and
Yeah.
focus on the other person, and being really transparent about it
Yeah. And
all.
humans are intuitive. They pick up on signals. Don't, it's not just about the words that you say. They really can pick up on, as you say, energy, which is some people might say, oh, well, that's a bit woo woo, but it's true. People pick up on each other's energy, the vibes that you give off, and they really do get a sense of, this uneasy feeling. The gut feeling is a real thing. It's a genuine thing. And I think it's quite,
Yeah, you bring up a very good point. Whenever I talk about energy, sometimes it helps to break it down into specific things. So the tone of your voice, your body language, and your facial expressions all give a vibe, right? And like also how you dress and present yourself too. However, this can really trip people up. And some sales experts are like, you have to have this tone and you have to use this exact word choice and you have to do this with your body and this pause. And then all of a sudden, somebody is so not present in the sales conversation because they're worrying about all this weird stuff and they're coming off inauthentically anyway. So the best way I found to just naturally have the right energy is to focus on your intention. So if your intention in the conversation is just to find out if this person is a fit or not, and if they are, to get excited about it, you are naturally going to say the right things and
Mm.
have the right energy.
Yeah. It's such a brilliant principle. I wish I'd known this 15 years ago when I wish I'd read your book 15 years ago when I was building my agency. So, AI, what is AI doing to sales? Good, bad, mixed?
Yeah. So AI is so helpful for sales research, like for prospect research, to understand common patterns, challenges, desires, even identifying companies to outreach to, their numbers, their contact details. It saves a lot of time when it comes to that. Everything else, I pretty much hate and haven't seen a good result from. The outreaches that are using, pulling something from your LinkedIn headline as an outreach message that ends up being like, I had somebody reach out to me and say, "Hey, have you thought about writing a book called Black Sheep Sales: How to Win More Sales Without Acting Like a Douchebag?" And I was like, "Yeah, I wrote it. Obviously your AI just pulled it, and
Yeah.
you're just doing that to everybody, like taking their headline." And I think there's an issue with, and I've heard about this, it's really hurting people's cognitive abilities, their critical thinking abilities. So they don't know how to write emails, and they're depending on AI to write all of their emails, and they don't sound like a real person. And they're not able to look at an AI response and say, that's a weird thing to say. I mean, I've tried to use AI to help, for example, with, I think I even did try one time with like an email or something. And what they gave back was just the driest, most traditional boomer sales BS. I was like, this is horrible. I feel so salesy. So that's what they're going to give you, is stuff that follows that traditional, really tired, really salesy, like car salesman vibe type of thing. So I have not seen good results with using AI for any type of actual communication.
No, I agree. I absolutely hate the phrase personalization at scale. I hear this all the time. This tool enables you to do personalization at scale because it's not personalization. Personalization is when a person thinks about another person and tailors what they're doing to that other person. And to do it at scale based on keywords in someone's LinkedIn profile and pulling in their last 3 blogs, it's so easy to spot that it's inauthentic. I don't know who's falling for this stuff at the moment. The number of emails I get, oh, curious to know what you're doing.
Ugh.
I'm like, you're not curious. You're not remotely curious. It's insane. It drives me mad. And the other one I get a lot is bakery management systems. People, because my surname is Baker.
This is how we met. This is how we
Yes,
met,
oh,
because
yes.
you were like, people reach out to me about bakery stuff, and I was like, that is so funny.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And is it damaging their reputations? I don't
Yes.
know, because I don't even notice them. I don't even register them. So I don't know. But it doesn't seem to be achieving anything. It seems like humans still need to know how to resonate. And I agree with you that in terms of helping a human do what they do better, it does save a lot of time, and it does, it's a bit of a lever for a human who knows what they're doing. And for you, because you're a brilliant salesperson, using it for the prospect research and all of that is amazing. For a junior who's never done sales, it's not going to be very helpful because they're not going to be able to tell what's relevant, to spot the opportunities. They're just not going to be able to use an AI to lift your playbook, your personality, all of that experience. So it just feels very inauthentic. And the thing that I hate the most is AI that pretends to be human. When you get a sales call, I don't know if you've had this yet, but you get a
No.
sales call from Sophie from so and so, and it's like sounds like a human, but you can spot the signs that Sophie's not a real human if you listen carefully. And to me, when you talk about manipulation, sales, douchebag sales being about manipulation, to me, that is the ultimate in manipulation. It is so unethical to get a human to speak to a machine believing it's a human. I just think, yep, fine, tell me I'm dealing with your chatbot in customer support. I'll happily deal with them. They might be better than your humans, but don't tell me I'm dealing with a human when I'm not, because that's just insulting my intelligence, insulting my humanness, insulting everything. It's awful.
Well, it's also like, if you're lying about this, what else do you lie about? It sets a precedent of somebody that you don't want to work with. People were like, oh, AI is going to replace salespeople. That is so funny to me. Maybe for something that's 25, 50, $100 store. For something that is 5, 6 figure investments, the person's going to want to make sure that that is a human giving their word. They're I's dotted and their T's crossed, because at least how AI is now, there's about a 50% error rate.
At least, yeah.
Yeah.
No one's accountable.
Yeah. Like, I had a conversation with a developer who's been a programmer for a long time, and his company said, can you program this AI to do what you do? And he worked for a year to try and get it to work. And he had to tell them it can't, because it has a 50% error rate, and a junior developer isn't going to know how to spot the errors, and it's just going to break things. So you have to train you have to hire a senior programmer still to be able to identify the issues. And this is the same with marketing and sales. You have to have an expert to be able to say, that doesn't work, that's not right, that. Otherwise, it's pointless.
And an expert who cares about their reputation, who's accountable. If it goes wrong, it actually means something to them. They're quite motivated to not let it go wrong, and they apologize when it does. Sometimes humans make mistakes, but humans also, good humans, own up to their mistakes, apologize, and move on. And I think it's so true. I've seen this happen so many times. Like the CEO, the C-level, this is the first time we've had a revolution like this where the C-level just can't delegate. You can't just say, you guys handle AI, and we're just going to get on with business as usual. But what the C-level is used to doing is saying, oh, well, this is a new tool, a new way of doing things. You know, you're our corporate social responsibility lead, you're our diversity and inclusion lead, whatever it is, whatever the new thing is that they've got to deal with. But with AI, the CEO is reading the newspaper, watching YouTube videos, podcasts, and the CEO thinks, this can replace my whole sales team. And then they make this like demand from on high. I would like you to replace the sales team with, AI sales development reps or whatever. And these pilots just don't deliver. And so much time is wasted. Time is wasted, but also it creates a lot of stress. Like your friend who's a programmer being asked to train your own replacement in a way that you won't be compensated for after you've left is, to me, it's like, well, no, that's his or her intellectual property, the skills that they've built up over a long time. And sure, if you want me to train a Heather to do Heather's job for your company, that's fine. But I'd like £1 million to do that. And then I would like a retainer for every time you use it, because you're using my brain and my intellectual property. So I just think there's so many minefields when it comes to AI. I think it's AI and sales. I think it's scary. But do you think that good salespeople can stand out more at the moment because there's so much crap? There's just so much sales slop.
Absolutely. One of the things that really gives me hope about AI is that it is incapable of a genuine new thought. All it can do is regurgitate what it already knows. So humans are the only people capable of a genuine new idea. So if you have a new idea for outreach to get somebody's attention, a fun way to hook them in, that is going to stand out compared to this just generic curious to know, here's some headline, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, the bar is so low, so low. And then in an actual sales conversation, as long as you get away from these horrible trainings and are just a human, there's such an opportunity to really stand out with your nuance, with your empathy, with your ability to offer an insight into a situation someone's having, as opposed to just mirroring what they said back to them or whatever annoying stuff that AI does that's just filler. I feel like AI is just white noise, not actually value adding. So a salesperson who adds value in some way, it's a stark difference.
Yeah, it's absolute gold. That's really interesting. And beyond AI, what sort of tech do you recommend? What's your kind of, are there specific CRMs or tools for outreach or handling sales conversations or anything like that? Is there anything that you're kind of really into?
Well, for CRMs, high level is absolutely taking over the space because it's everything in one. The tech that is most important for sales, I would say, is having a way to record the conversation because you cannot improve what you can't examine. So, whether that is phone recordings or video call recordings, and also having a way to manage your pipeline and be able to see the historical context for each conversation. Because when you're doing sales at any type of large volume, it's easy to forget what we talked about, what you saw, what your challenges were, etc. So having a universal view where you can click on someone's name and see, okay, we had this text message conversation, then they opened this email. That type of thing is going to help so much when you re-engage with that person rather than having, I don't know, like an Excel spreadsheet or just they didn't buy in the moment. So they're basically dead to me, which is what happens all the time. So an easy way to manage that and be able to automate the tasks associated with that. So somebody says, we're going to do this in Q1 and we plan to work with you in Q2, being able to set a task that reminds you to check in with this person. Those are the most valuable things as far as
And
tech.
how big of an issue is CRM hygiene? Because I always found getting people to use the CRM properly was a nightmare. And if one person doesn't use it properly on the team, then there's all this like uncertain, there's a black hole basically around all the conversations they've had. Like, how do you ensure people use the CRM properly and follow the processes?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a number of ways to incentivize salespeople. Salespeople are incentivized by money and recognition. So, if you can set measurable KPIs for CRMs and then reward them for it, that will get them to show up. I mean, the main thing when you're selling anything to anyone, including to salespeople, is this is going to make you more money. So if we're going to we're going to do a live pipeline review and collaboratively come up with the outreach strategy to this person that you talk to, and we go into the CRM and there's nothing there, how am I going to help you? What are you going to do with this? You're going to lose that sale. That money and time and effort you spent in that conversation is wasted because you were too lazy to put the information in. And we try to make it as easy as possible. And I know admin work sucks. Boo hoo. I'm sorry. Get over it. Everybody has things about their job that they don't like. Cry me a river. It's going to make you, it's not just because we're annoying. It's literally making you more money. And so when they can see in the moment, I wish I had that information. I wish that I could do that with it. And then also having incentives and rewards around it. And you can also have consequences. If it's this many months of you just not entering your information, we're going to have to put you on a probationary period because it's seriously hurting your ability to make sales. And that's what you're here to do.
Oh, that's very interesting. And speaking of sales teams, the VP of sales, why, I think you mentioned, I don't know if it's in your book or on your website, you talk about the VP of sales, which in the UK we call sales director or head of sales. That's often a revolving door, that job. There's people who get the job and then 3 months later they're out. Why does that happen?
My goodness, that's such a good question. It is one of the most expensive mistakes that a company can make, along with salespeople. Any sales hires in general, it's just not something you want to shortcut. So often when somebody hires a VP of sales or a sales director, the CEO is abdicating. They're like, this is not my thing. You figure it out. I want results immediately. If I don't see results immediately, I'm going to fire you. So it's this lack of understanding around what is required from the CEO in working with the VP and how much time the VP needs and what expectations are realistic. And a lot of times a VP or a director of sales is looking more at numbers on a sheet than a strategy. Sales strategy is what creates the numbers on the sheet. So you're limited if that strategy isn't there. And it's a different skill set that a lot of people don't have. Messaging, positioning, and strategy, it often aligns more so with marketing, but messaging, positioning, and strategy in sales is different also from marketing. messaging, positioning, and strategy. They need to be complementary, but a lot of VPs of sales don't have this. They just were good salespeople, which meant that they were pretty good at bullshitting. And you can't really teach someone how to bullshit like you. You have your own specific way of bullshitting. And that's not a strategy, by the way. So it's not a strategy that's specific to this company, this offer, this audience, which is what's needed for everybody to create the same results. So it's usually just a major skill gap. And the VP or director of sales is also very ego driven a lot of the time and resistant to outside help because they don't want to lose their job. So I've specifically targeted companies where the owner is working with the sales team instead of a VP or a manager, because the experience that I've had is that that person just makes it harder to do work because they think I'm saying something about their acumen, which I guess I kind of am. Your acumen sucks. Like if I was in that position, I would be worried if somebody brought in outside help because you're paying me to do that job, but I'm clearly not doing that job and you need someone else to come in. So, I mean, I think it makes sense if like I just need to create the strategy and then the VP needs to run it. Then that's a really great relationship. It's just we found that 90% of sales leaders are incompetent. And it's because they're good at selling themselves in the interview and then bad at actually doing the job or setting expectations with their CEO or setting expectations with their team. People management is so different from actually selling. You can't just take your top seller and make them your director. It's not going to work. So it's just really interesting how sales specifically, so many people still have no idea what they're doing and try to shortchange it so much when it is the most crucial part of their business income.
That is so true. And you know, I built my agency and the sales always came back to me. I would bring in a business development person. I tried outsourced business development agencies, business development people. And ultimately I went off, had a baby. And when I came back, I had handed over all of my responsibilities. And so I stepped back into sales. And when I did that, because my motivations were so beautifully aligned with a good sales process, it really did make such a huge difference because I wasn't selling to get the commission. I was selling to get the long-term business because I was the owner of the business and the long-term business meant a lot more for me. And then I kind of got to the point where I had to train other people in the team to kind of step up. And that was the most effective way of growing the business. It couldn't be outsourced and the other thing that happens when you outsource is you get the salesperson sells something and the company can't deliver it because they've talked it up, they've done their bullshit, and now the delivery team is really upset. There's this big clash because they've got to deliver something that is either unprofitable or is impossible, and the salesperson's got their commission, which is just also so unfair and so frustrating.
That is such a common issue. I mean, it makes a big difference when you have an expert to come in who takes the details of your offer and your audience and says, okay, these are the questions we need to ask, and this is what we need to communicate. Because the reason a salesperson is overselling is that they don't have a good strategy. So the only way they know how to sell is by overpromising and exaggerating. If your offer is good, you don't need to overpromise and exaggerate. You need positioning and messaging that reflects the value of the offer. So that's often what's missing, that's making the salesperson compensate in this way. And it makes a big difference when you have like an outside, it's just hard as the business owner to see the label inside the bottle. So, and it's also not the business owner's skill set to know which of these details of my experience of 20 years is important to communicate to a salesperson, to communicate to a client. So having an outside person come in and put that together is going to save so much time of trial and error.
Yeah. I completely understand that, and it really resonates with my experience. We've got a few minutes left, and I really want to ask you about the anti-audience. Tell me about the anti-audience, because I love the concept.
Yeah. So most people are just focusing on their ideal audience. And a lot of times they're just focusing on the demographics of their ideal audience, not even the psychographics of them, which the psychographics are always going to call someone in more. So for example, somebody who has more of a casual bookkeeping business you want to communicate this is not for the person who cares about people wearing blazers. We're not
Mm.
going to wear blazers. We're just going to do a real good job. Okay. So you can communicate that ahead of time and actively repel the other person, which makes the right person more attracted to you because they know the more specific you are about that person, the better. So being able to say, you're just looking to check a box. You're looking to hire someone and say, we did that. You're looking for someone who's at your beck and call. This is not me. I work in a partnership way. If you want somebody who cares about your business as much as you and who does great work, although I have a lot of tattoos, this is going to attract the person that you love working with. And
Mm.
you're not shaming or judging your anti audience. They should go find, there are plenty of firms that are stuffy and buttoned up and totally fine with just being a box that you check. They deserve to go find them. And you
Yeah.
deserve to have your people because your people don't want a firm that works like that. So, getting really clear on those, again, you want to look at the patterns of the people who are really, really happy with the results that you give them and the people who are really unhappy with the results. And from there, you can create your ideal audience and anti audience.
That's so interesting. And I think that kind of resonates with, if you look on social media, a lot of social media advisors or strategists say, play it safe, don't venture into controversial topics. But actually, I think that often just makes you so vanilla. Whereas I think it's very empowering. It's very hard, but it's very empowering to be able to say, this is my controversial opinion. I stand by it. A lot of people don't like it, but the ones that do love me for saying it out loud. And I'm okay with being a bit repelling. Do you know what Marmite is? Or is that a...
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
It's
So,
Australian, isn't it?
no, Vegemite is the Australian version,
Oh,
but Marmite is, their slogan was you love it or you hate it. So someone
yeah.
is Marmite if you love them or you hate them. And I'm always okay with being Marmite, even though it can be quite stressful in the moment to be controversial and to repel a certain crowd, right? But, it's okay to do that because if you repel one crowd, then the opposite crowd is the one that potentially resonates, so, and more so than ever before, which I think is the most important thing.
Yes, they're more likely to buy. Instead of a bunch of people who are lukewarm, you have people that become red hot, and you don't have to waste your time with people that you don't want to work with anyway.
Yeah.
So it's this scarcity versus abundance mindset. I mean, when you think about how many clients, unless you have some massive volume number that you need to hit of like 100 clients a month or something, most people just need about 25 a year and they're super happy. Then
Mm.
you can be very clear and you will, I know you're saying it's hard in the moment to say no, but after you do it, your inner person feels so good that you respected your boundaries and you valued yourself like that. And as long as you can do it in a way that doesn't feel like judgment or shame, it's just, hey,
Yeah.
I'm not your person. You deserve to find your person. Like I have people sometimes, my headline on LinkedIn is stop selling like a douchebag. And I've had people message me and say, that is so vulgar and disgusting. And I'm like, man, we are not a fit. Like that is the least inappropriate thing about me. Like if you want somebody prim and proper, you deserve to find that person. And it's
No.
not me. And I'm so glad we know now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, that's so fascinating. Well, it's been so brilliant talking to you, Aleasha. I'm so inspired. I can't wait to revamp my sales strategy, especially after reading Black Sheep Sales, How to Win More Sales Without Acting Like a Douchebag. Highly recommend it. Linked in the description. How can people work with you if a founder is watching this and they think, really need to sort out my sales? How can they get in touch? What's the best way for them to work with you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I also have my sales podcast. Sales is not a dirty word. And if you listen to How to Sell Like a Natural, that's a really great episode to start with and see if we're aligned. And then I have links everywhere for fitting conversations to see if we're fit to work together.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. It's been really lovely to have you on the podcast today.
I've had such a good time, Heather. Thank you for asking such good questions.
I don't know if I did, but thank you.